I'm using Daniel Smith's watercolours. I'm wetting the sky area here, and I'm also wetting the foreground with clean water. So I'm going in with a card here. I'm tapping all of the colours, kind of mixing them on the palette and then applying it to the paper. And it's kind of damp into wet because the paints don't have any water in them. They're straight from the tube. So I think these colours go really nicely together. They're quite sort of earthy sort of tones as well, quite muted. But equally, just choose your own colours and have some fun. You can learn so much about watercolour painting. So I'm just spritzing here using a spritzer bottle just to get the paint moving and blending. As you can see, I'm tilting as well. This dilutes the paint and the paint runs down. So you're kind of directing and blending, and I'm just spritzing away just with clean water. And just see what happens. Be patient with this stage. Allow the colours to blend and mix. You can obviously, I'm diluting the colours here. I'm just going to apply a little bit more of the Moonglow for some darks here and there using the plastic card, and I've cut up the plastic card as well so that it allows me to sort of paint smaller marks. So you can cut them up into smaller sizes to do this. For step 2, I'm going to concentrate on the sky area, painting it wet into wet using pouring, tilting and spritzing techniques. I've squeezed out some Daniel Smith's Lunar Black. You can use black or Paynes grey just for a darker colour. And I'm applying it damp into damp with the plastic card to create sort of some information maybe on the horizon line. It's funny, when I'm looking at this back, sort of doing the edit and the voiceover, I can see sort of different things in the painting. I actually end up with something completely different. So it's amazing how this can get your imagination going. So I'm creating a sky here by spritzing that dark and allowing it to run in the sky, tilting and spritzing just to get that paint moving. So what I would suggest is be the boss of the painting. Don't be afraid of it. See what happens. You can learn so much. So I'm mixing up Lunar Blue into the black here, and I'm actually squeezing the brush hairs to allow that puddle to fall onto the paper. So I'm not actually physically touching the paper with the brush. I find it's less interference, the more beautiful and transparent the washes can appear. So as you can see here, I'm patiently sort of tilting and guiding the paint. So as you can see, the Lunar Black creates lots of granulation along with that Lunar Blue. And I'm just applying a little bit of paint there with my brush onto the paper. Got a little bit impatient, I think. And I'm just tilting now the other way, getting everything to blend. Look how atmospheric that sky looks. It looks amazing. This is when I get really excited about the watercolour. Now, at any stage, you can stop and leave it as this sort of semi-abstract style. So I'll sort of leave that up to you. I keep going on with my painting, but if you see something you really love, then just stop. You can always come back to it another time. So I'm putting even darker washes at the top there, slightly thicker, still using the Lunar Blue. It's about sort of 75% Lunar Blue, 25% black. Again, you can decide those sort of percentages. But I want the sky to be darker at the top because that's the nearest to us, and it creates, even though this is semi-abstract, it does create depth in the painting. I like a little bit of both, realism or impressionism along with abstraction. So as you can see, I've got some clouds developing here. I'm working mostly wet into wet using tilting techniques. So mixing up some more of the darks here, a real mixture of the different colours. And again, using that sort of pouring technique, so allowing the sort of colour to run onto the paper by squeezing the brush hairs. You really need to make plenty of paint and really load your brush. You need a big brush that sort of carries lots of paint for this sort of technique of pouring to be successful. So you may need to practice it beforehand. So again, I'm tilting, and this creates quite a diagonal sort of line going across that sky, looking very dynamic. just adding a little bit of dark there and allowing that to drizzle into the painting. It's got some more blue in it there, so I've got some different sort of colour variations here, and again tilting the other way. You can see it's quite messy because I've got lots of paint on my left hand there, tilting downwards as well to get the paint moving, and upwards as well. So, you know, you could almost lose your whole painting by doing lots of tilting. So don't be disheartened with that. Just keep practicing, you know, see what happens. It's very creative. It's very experimental. So for step 3, I'm going to work on the middle ground and foreground. I'm going to add some more darks to the sky, wet into wet. So just adding sort of thin lines here in the foreground, using some of that Piemontite genuine, adding a little bit here on the horizon as well, just sort of swiping a little bit with the card here and there. And I will put a link for my plastic card tutorial to show you how to use it if you're unfamiliar with that technique and you want more practice. So I've literally painted thin lines, drawing with the card, using more paint here, applying it quite creamy to the surface there to create the look of trees. So I'm kind of swiping a little bit with the card to create sort of more of a sort of soft curves rather than geometric marks. So just tilting a little bit here and just sort of finessing with the card, creating marks, almost scratching into the surface to create thin lines, and then printing with the card to create the sort of tops of the trees there, to create the canopy, again in that sort of soft curvy way. I've decided to swap to a brush to get those softer marks, so using Quinacridone gold with the black to create a lovely dark green, and this is a size 4 kind of long rigger. But use any sort of brush that you feel comfortable with. It was the first one I could grab hold of actually. So I'm sort of varying the colours here, using a bit of ultramarine as well and some yellow and the Quinacridone gold just to create some more greens in the picture. So I've decided to go for a very landscape sort of scene here. I didn't really quite start out sort of thinking that way, but I've decided to sort of add these trees. So mixing up Quinacridone gold, yellow and a pinch of blue, and I'm just applying with a large flat brush this sort of lovely golden yellowy green colour there, wet into wet, and adding some more darks there, the black, the lunar blue, tilting now. It's almost like a glaze because it's a very, very thin wash here. So a glaze is a very thin transparent wash over another, usually dry wash. So my foreground has kind of dried off a little bit here. So again, just tilting, allowing the paint to flow. And again, another sort of yellowy sort of glaze here, with a pinch of the blue, pinch of Quinacridone gold, leaving sort of gaps as well. And again, tilting, and it's really developing quite nicely here. And again, at any time, do stop if you like the look of what you've created. You don't have to continue on. Sometimes even take a photograph of the painting and see what you think. Sometimes looking at a photograph gives you a very different perspective of your own work. So mixing up some very dark colours here. I've got some black, ultramarine and burnt sienna. And it's, as you can see, it's a little bit creamier, a little bit thicker. And I just wanted to put some more dark in the sky. I couldn't resist. So I wanted it to be darker at the top to almost balance the painting. And I'm tilting that colour now, allowing it to flow down, mixing up some more dark, adding some water there and dripping it into the top left corner and just tilting that as well. And it's a very dramatic sky. And I'm using the spritzer bottle now just to get the paint moving a little bit. I'm just having fun with it. Now, if your sky has dried off, I wouldn't attempt this because you might get lots of cauliflowers. So my sky was still quite sheeny or shiny. So it allowed me to kind of add more wet paint. And I'm just sort of spritzing away here, having fun with this painting, just to get this sort of dramatic, stormy sky. I'm spritzing some of the foreground now as well, just to generate a little bit more light, a bit more contrast there. And just tilting the sky here and just mopping up any of the excess paint there using an old cloth. You can also use the paper towel as well to soak up the paint. Just try not to touch the painting. For step 4, I'm going to add some salt, sprinkle it onto the damp paint. I'm also going to use watercolour pencils and sandpaper to create texture. And I'm going to use the card to sort of create the look of tree trunks and branches and also houses. So I've sprinkled some salt and now I'm just lifting off the damp paint to create some light shapes using the plastic card. Try to swipe just once, don't go back and forth because you could damage the paper. So if the paint runs back in on itself, wait a little bit longer, it's still too wet. So I'm just having fun here, lifting out some light branches as well in the sort of imaginary trees here in the middle ground, just using the plastic card. And I'm just building up the details here, the light in the fields, and just swiping here and there to create diagonal marks as well to lead the eye through, and lifting off to create the look of fence posts, etc. All from my imagination. So I'm just swiping here for the front of buildings to create light, and I'll paint the rooftops later. So I'm using a watercolour pencil and sandpaper. This is Derwent Inktense pencil, but you can use any watercolour pencil. And I'm rubbing the tip of the pencil against the sandpaper, allowing the pigment to fall onto the wet or damp surface. And as you can see there, it creates some lovely sort of textures, and it shows the colour that you're using as well. It still looks quite dark, but it'll come across as a sort of dark bluey green, etc. So I'm using a little bit more of a yellowy sort of colour here just to create some lighter marks. And I'm sort of using the sort of pencil shavings in the foreground here as well. I'm just spritzing here just to sort of spritz off some more paint to create some more light. I'm doing this just for sort of my own sort of instincts. Your painting may look quite different, so just go by your instincts to see what you need to do. But if you need more light, just spritz off the paint with the spritzer bottle. So I'm just swiping a little bit more here. I thought I might sort of press hard with the corner of the plastic card as well into the paper to create the look of the tree trunks and branches there. This is permanent, so do practice this technique. But what happens is the paint runs into those scratches to create sort of darker marks there. Just lifting off a little bit more here to create sort of fence posts on the painting as well, just building up the detail. For step 5, I'm going to add more details using the plastic card and a brush. I'm going to use spattering techniques to create textures and details, and I'm going to add more darks to the horizon area. And I'm using some of the Piemontite Genuine. You can use burnt Sienna or burnt Umber for the rooftops. I'm actually applying it with the plastic card here, so it's very sort of loose, and adding a little bit to this kind of barn building on the right that's kind of appeared as well. Bit of a happy accident there. So I'm adding sort of windows to the front of the house there using some darks and the corner of my plastic card. I've swapped to a brush now just to finesse some of the rooftops here and there using the burnt sienna with a pinch of the Piemontite Genuine, adding a little bit to that barn to the right, and giving the sort of foreground area a little spatter using just the colours in my palette really. I've got a little bit of a light green here spattering in the foreground, just here and there, just to sort of add the colour to the top of the trees as well. Really loading my brush, sort of spattering this limey sort of green colour. Now I could have left my painting here, but I want to create a little bit more drama. So I'm taking a few risks really, but I see this as more experimenting and I want you to do the same. So this is a very dark colour, some of the black and lunar blue, and I've squeezed it on to the horizon area, and I'm just tilting now and spritzing, allow that dark to sort of run down. So you've got this lovely contrast on the horizon there, lots of drama, light and dark, and textures as well. So I'm spritzing there. You can see there where the salt has worked there on the trees, that's up in the sky area. So I'm just spritzing here, bottom left hand corner. Again, the salts work beautifully there from earlier. And I'm just spritzing here just to get rid of a little bit of that dark, to get some of my light back. Just here and there, up in the sky as well, behind the rooftops there. So I've kind of hidden some of the front of the houses there. And I thought it'd be quite nice just to spatter with a little bit of Quinacridone gold, yellow with a pinch of blue. Any blue will do. And I'm going to allow the painting to dry naturally to allow the salt to work. And as you can see here, the salt has worked beautifully. So for step 6, the final stage, I'm going to add white gouache to add some lights here and there. So I'm painting in the windows wet on dry, using the white straight from the tube just to bring them out a little bit. I previously used a dart, but I'd lost that, sort of spritzing earlier. But this really does add a little bit of light to draw your eye into those little houses. And of course, I'm going to finish with a spatter. So I'm diluting the white and I'm using my size 8 brush just to spatter some white here and there. Anything that goes astray, just mop it as I did there with a paper towel, just so you kind of create a nice sort of bit of texture without going too mad. And remember, protect any other valuable items that you might have around you. And then remove the washi tape to reveal a lovely white border. And here's a close-up. There is so much texture and detail here. I'm really pleased with it. And I really hope you're inspired to have a go experimenting with the watercolour using all of these yummy techniques. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments section below. If you would like to access my exclusive tutorials with downloadable PDF documents with progress photos and instructions, why not think about joining my Patreon membership? Details about the membership can be found in the description below. Just click Patreon. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. Happy painting. Bye for now.